Hi, welcome back to your Android user interface session number 11. So, having continuing from our last session, we had studied something about visibility handling and then iconography and XML drawable. So today we are going to study about some more views that are there in Android Studio. So earlier we have extensively used and studied about edit text view, button view, image view. So those views you are very well versed about. But there are other views as well which we haven't discussed so much during our sessions. So today we'll just use those views and see what they are. For example, radio button, radio group, checkboxes, switch button, drop down, and progress bars and seek bars. So these are some of the views that we'll study about today. So let's move on to our first view slide, which is the radio button. So the radio buttons allow the user to select one option from a set. So basically what we are referring to here is that if there is a question and you need to answer it, you can just select yes, maybe or no. And there is another view which is the radio group view or class. So there is a difference between a radio button and a radio group. So the radio button is not dependent on the answer that is selected. So for example, we can select yes, maybe and no accordingly. So we can select all three in the radio button class, but in the radio group class we can only select one of them. We cannot select all four of them or two of them together. So we can only select one of them, and whenever we select the next one, the previously selected value or option will get deselected. So if we read the definition for radio group, it says this class is used to create a set of multiple radio buttons. Checking one radio button that belongs to a radio group unchecks any previously checked radio button within the same group. So what it basically is trying to say is that this class, radio group class, contains multiple radio buttons, and each button is only one option or selection can be made at one given time. If we select a different option, the previously selected, so the previously checked radio button will get unchecked. That is what this definition is trying to portray. So the basic difference between a radio button is that we can the radio button options are independent of the selection. So it can be yes, maybe and no together, but in a radio group it can only be one option at one time. So let's study something about radio buttons and radio group in Android Studio and how to implement them. So for that, let's open the Android Studio. We can just remove the excess code here. So either you can just delete the old code, or we can just create a new layout. And form score fields underscore 1. The layout root element can be either linear layout or relative layout. It really doesn't matter, because we are not focusing on the layout as such. We are focusing on the elements that we want to use. So what we can do to introduce a radio button here is either we can just drag and drop from the design elements that are given here, and we can just the code will be given in the text area. For example, this radio button we just drag and drop, and we see the code automatically appearing in our text area, which is a simple method, which is a shortcut method. But in our case we don't, because we are learning how to code, so it's really better for you to understand how the code is learned and how the code is written for each and every element, UI element and everything. So that is why it is better that you write the code. So what we can do is here is we can put the option as a radio button. Width can be kept as wrap content, and height also, sorry, width also as wrap content, height also as wrap content, and some text that needs to be shown for this radio button. Let's suppose option 1, and this is your radio button. So let's use another radio button here and third radio button here, where option is 2, and here we can change it to 3. So the option becomes so there are 3 radio buttons here with option 1, 2 and 3. So if we just run our code in the application, in the AVD, then we can actually see the radio buttons. But here if you notice that these are not the options that we have written in our code. So the reason why it is not coming here on the AVD, it is not showing here in the Android phone, is because we haven't added this to the Java file. So the last Java file that the code is being picked up is from this file, which is not our file written here in the code. So we need to add this file to our Java. So for that, let's go to our Java, this Java file, Java folder and main activity, and here we see that we have set content view as r.layout form fields. So that is why it's picking up, it is not picking up form fields 1, it is picking up form underscore fields. So that is why we cannot see it in our AVD. So in order to add our form fields 1 in our Java activity, what we need to is define this in the resource folder under the layout folder here. So now we see that we have this form fields 1 folder. So what we need to do is we need to just add it here _1 and close this. Now this is being added in the main activity in the Java folder, and now if we run this, so if we run this on our AVD, this is how it will look like. So this is the default color, the accent color that is picked up by the radio button inside, and there is no relation between the 3 options here, so we can select all 3 of them together as well. For unchecking, we need to use the Java programming for that, so we'll tell you how to do that later on. But right now you can see that all 3 of them can be selected at the same time because we are using the radio button class. So now let's see, if we use radio group instead of a radio button, then what will happen. So radio group width can be kept as wrap content, height also wrap content, and the closing tag here needs to be kept at the end, because we need to enclose all of them, all of the radio buttons inside one radio group. So this is how we enclose all 3 radio buttons inside one radio group. So if we run this in our Android emulator again, so you'll see that this is the default selection. The first option is the default selection, and now if we click on option number 2, the option 1 radio button gets removed itself. So now these are a part of radio group. That is why there can be only one selection at a single point of time. So this is the basic difference between a radio group and a radio button. So according to the requirement, we can use a radio group or a radio button. That depends on what we need to create. So now let's go back to our presentation, and the next topic is checkbox. So checkboxes allow the user to select one or more options from a set. For example, we have this set of options here and we need to select more options than one. Then we choose checkboxes because they allow us to select more than one option. So let's see how to use them using Android Studio. So let's go back to our Android Studio, and here let's define a checkbox. So the checkbox element is defined as checkbox here. Width can be wrap content, height also can be wrap content, and let's write some text as checkbox 1. Not necessarily that you have to supply it with a text, but it's your option. Normally there is an option to select what needs to be selected, which is given through the text message. So that is why. Otherwise there are some cases where you need not to supply text, so you can just remove the text from this from the view here. So if we just run this application again and see here, so this is our checkbox which is highlighted in the pink color or accent color. So this is how the checkbox gets highlighted, selected or unselected. Also, if you notice here, if I uncheck or check, there is an animation sort of an effect that is there to be seen. So this animation effects and these color effects were introduced in Lollipop version as we discussed it in the first session. So that is why you can see the animation effects on all the phones or platforms or applications that were built after the Lollipop version. The versions or the applications that were built before the Lollipop version, they might not have these effects in them. Also, the default color is the accent color, which can be seen in the colors file here. So this is the values folder where we can find the colors file, and this is the accent color which is getting picked up by default. So also here, if we close our application, if we just remove our application and open it again, so now here by default nothing is selected, neither a checkbox nor the radio button. So if we want some to be pre-selected by default, then what we need to do is, so to do that we need to define the ID of any particular view that we want to show as default. So in this case let's use the ID property radio. So define this property here, which will be checked button property. So the checked button property, we need to pass the ID at ID slash radio. So we have defined the radio button here using ID property, and here we have used the checked button property to attach the radio button here to show as the default checked button. So if we run our application in our emulator again and open the application, so now here the default selection is the option 1, because we have set the checked button radio 1 as default option. So this was about how to keep one selection as default and how to introduce a checkbox and the animations about it. And let's go to our session here and start with the next topic, which is switch. So let's read the definition first. A switch is a two-state toggle switch widget or view that can select between two options. So basically a switch can select between two options. There will be only two options which can be set for a switch, and those two options can be selected by using this indicator here. So this is the switch indicator or view that can be seen on the screen, and the options can be set, the only two options can be set for this switch. So let's see how to implement a switch using the Android Studio. Also another thing, that these elements that we are introducing here, the handler of these elements or the actual code of these elements will be handled in the Java class. They are not handled in the XML class. So but we can just see how their behavior, what is their behavior through XML files. So right now they don't have any handling or they don't have any value to them unless we define them using the handler in the Java class. So having said that, let's introduce our switch element here. The height is wrap intent, width is also wrap intent, and we can provide this with a text here. Let's say switch 1, and let's run this program and then see how it actually sees on the emulator. So this is how a switch looks on an emulator and behaves on an emulator with this animation. The color is default accent, and this animation while closing and opening. So this is the two states in which we can switch the option using the switch element or view. So this switch can be used in our forms or in our options in settings where we want to switch from one state to another state. For example, we want to disable the notifications, then we can switch it off. And if you want to enable the notifications in our application, then we can switch it on in our settings. So these views or these elements can be used accordingly according to the particular values that we want to set. So we need to see which can be the best view for that particular attribute or field, then we can use the values or views accordingly. Then let's move to our next element here, which is spinners. So basically spinners are nothing but drop down elements. So these are called spinners in Android. So if we read the definition here, spinners provide a quick way to select one value from a set. In the default state, a spinner shows its currently selected value. So basically a spinner is used to select one value out of many values, and the default value is the selected value, the currently selected value. So this is where we use the spinners. So basically for example, if we have to select a city or a state, so there could be, let's say, many values there, over 100 values, over 200 values. So then we need to select one value. So this is where spinners or drop downs come into play. Now one thing to keep in mind here is that we need all these values that come inside a spinner in an array. So basically what is an array? Array is a set of homogeneous values. The homogeneous values can be integers, they can be strings, they can be some other attributes, but they need to be homogeneous, but they cannot be of different sets. So for adding the values to a spinner, we'll have to first create an array. So how to create an array? Let's go back to our Android Studio and see. But first let's create our spinner. So the element name used here is spinner, and the width can be kept as match parent, and the height can be kept as 40 dp, and then we need to define the background, because as we can see here, this is the spinner, but we cannot see the actual background or actual area that is covered. So color, let's say yellow, and then let's provide some margins from the side. Margin from all sides, let's say around 10 dp. So here we have created our spinner element, which is seen here. So if we just remove the color, you will be able to see the drop down here. So the drop down arrow here, so this is by default inside the spinner. So if we run this on our simulator, we'll see something like this, where there is no content inside the drop down. So to create a content, we need to use array. So we need to supply content inside an array and then use it for the spinner. So to define the array, we'll use the strings.xml file here, and here we'll just delete this because it's already created, and we'll start from scratch. So for defining the array, we need to define string array, and we need to provide the name of the array. So let's suppose we provide the name of the array as city. So let's define it as cities or city array. So here you can define the items that you want to so these are basically our drop down items that we are going to be showing to the user. So here let's suppose we take in 6 items. First city name is Delhi, then city name is Mumbai, and the third is Kolkata, and fourth is Indore, fifth is Chennai, and the last is Chandigarh. So these are the city names that we need to show to the user. So we need to add them under the item tag. So now, having defined these values here in the array element here, we can use that in our spinner element or class or view, and we can use it as entries. So we need to define it before the bracket, otherwise it will not pick up. So entries. So this is how we define. We'll call the array, and we'll populate our spinner with the values that we've just defined using that array. So here we'll use array slash the name of the array, which was city. So as soon as we run our application in the emulator, we see the drop down populated with some values. So whatever the value we select, that gets selected in the drop down. And by default, if you notice, by default, if we run our application here, by default the first element in the array, that is the Delhi city name, that gets selected here by default. So just to reiterate, what we have done for the spinner element here is that we have defined a spinner element, and to populate the spinner element with some values, we went into the strings.xml file. There we defined a strings-array. We defined a strings.array-array by the name of city, and then we entered the values that were to be shown in the drop down, and then we used this array name in our spinner, and we called that array name in our spinner to show the values here. So let's go back to our session presentation, and the next topic that we want to cover is the progress bar. So basically, progress bar is a user interface element that indicates the progress of an operation. So basically, this bar is used when some operation or long running operation is in progress and the user needs to know how much the operation has progressed. So if we do not show the progress bar or we do not show the progress of that operation, the user might think that there is no operation going on the screen, or the operation has been cancelled, or the operation was not successful. So in order to see the progress, we need to show the user the progress bar. So how to define this in Android Studio? Let's go back to our Android Studio and just use the progress bar element with height as wrap content and height and width both as wrap content. So here if we run this on our Android emulator, you can see the loader, the progress bar that is going on. So basically this is used when there is a long wait in any operation that is going on in the application. And here what we do is, normally we use visibility. With visibility we show the progress bar once the operation starts, and we hide the visibility as soon as the operation is ends or is successfully completed. Then our next topic is Seekbar. So Seekbar is basically we use in media players to set volume or to see the actual duration of the video progression. So we use the seek bar in for viewing that. So the seek bar is an extension of a progress bar that adds a draggable thumb. So what this means is, basically the seek bar is an extension of the progress bar only, but in the seek bar we have the option of dragging the value on the seek bar. So we can drag the value of the seek bar using our fingers and set the value accordingly onto the seek bar. So the user can touch the thumb and drag left or right to set the current progress level. So basically this means that we can set our volume according to our seek bar, and we can set the duration of the video that we want to watch. Let's suppose if you are watching a video of 10 minutes and you want to directly go to the 8th minute, you can just directly scroll or move the seek bar to that 8th minute and then start the video from there. So let's see how to implement this in Android Studio. So let's say we have a Seekbar element. Width can be kept as match parent and height as wrap content. So if we run this on our emulator screen here, we can see the seek bar here, and the default position is the leftmost position and the rightmost position is the end position. And here if we click on it, and it gets animated and the circle gets bigger, and as soon as we start moving it towards the right side, the left side gets filled with the color, default accent color, showing the progress of the seek bar. So basically we can set the value of the seek bar accordingly, and the unhighlighted or the gray colored area is the area that is left that can be seeked, and the pink color area is basically the area that is completed. So we can drag and keep our position according to this on the seek bar according to our requirements. So this is in case where the progress starts from the leftmost side, that is 0 value, and goes up till the maximum value. So in case that we want to set the seek bar at a particular position, the starting point at a particular position, we can use the property called progress and define the value at 50. So what will happen is the starting point will become 50 of the seek bar. So basically it will start from the half part of it. So if we run this application in our simulator, so this is how the progress bar will the seek bar will show the default position at the center, because we have defined the progress at 50. Similarly, if we say progress at 20 and then see, so now the default position will become 20, but it is still movable. We can still keep the value, we can still set the value according to our liking on the seek bar, but the default position can also be set using progress property. So this was all about the seek bar, and let's just revise what we have done here. So initially we started off with radio button, how to define a radio button and the difference between the radio button and the radio group. So the radio button are independent of each other, but if we put them inside a radio group, then they become dependent. So then only one can be selected, but individually if we use radio buttons, then all of them can be selected. We've seen them by putting 3 radio buttons inside one radio group. Then we use the checkbox element or view, where we just added a text checkbox next to it, and then we saw how the animation for the checkbox worked, and then we used the switch view, and we saw the animation on the switch view as well. And then we also discussed where to use these different elements in our application or our form view. Then after the switch view, we studied about the progress bar, and after the progress bar we studied about spinners. What is spinner? Basically it's a drop down with a large number of values, and these values are defined in an array under the strings.xml file, and that array name can be used to call those values inside the spinner. And then we talked about the seek bar, or this can be a progress bar in a way. So how to set the default position in a seek bar, and what is the default position of a seek bar, and where to use seek bars in. So this basically covers all our views or elements that we did not discuss earlier. But now, having discussed about them, having seen how to use them, we'll be using them in our next exercises and coming sessions. So it's better that you revise once all of them, when to use it, how to use it, and where to use it. And there is an exercise or an example right next to this video also. So you can use that example, or you can go through the study material in the for the video, which is next to the video. So you can just go through the video, you can go through the study material, just learn where to use these elements, and what are the various types of elements, and how can we use them in our application to make our application more streamlined and more efficient for the front end user. So this is basically what we had to cover in this session, and hopefully we hope that you have learned all about the views that we have talked in this session. And if you have any queries, do write into us, and let's see you in the next session. Thank you so much.